All right, before we get into the guide, I just wanted to ask you guys real quick if you could drop a like on the video and go ahead and subscribe. If you don't like the video by the end, or you want to click off and, take that like away, you can replace it with a dislike, you can unsubscribe, won't hurt me any. I'm just asking that you go ahead and do that before we get into the video because I am at 42 subscribers as of the time of recording this. I'm really trying to push for 100 subscribers by the end of the month. You guys have been amazing with the support recently, and I just want to try and make the best content I can for you guys. So if you can, go ahead and support me, like, subscribe, go ahead and drop a comment down below. What character you're looking to build, maybe what character you want a guide for in the upcoming future, or whatever content that you may want to see from me. Now, with that being said, let's get into the video. All right, so I wanted to make this video just as a simple guide for Lady NIFLE, and my goal with this series is to do just that. Make simple guides for these characters. Here at the start, for the first couple characters I'm going to do, I'm not going to have spreadsheets, I'm not going to have best damage, I'm not going to have in-game testing because I'm also not there. As you can see, my Lady NIFLE is only level 50. My next character is level 40, and then 30, 20, right? And then those are the only characters that I have unlocked. This is just going to be from what I can understand from the kit, what I can see, what I've read, and things I've also seen online. So I'm just going to suggest certain things to you. There are going to be times where I tell you, yes, this is for sure the best thing to do, best weapon, whatever the case may be, or what you're looking for. There's going to be other times, especially with the demon wedges, where I don't have access to all of them right now. So I can't really tell you what will be the best. I can only tell you what to look for now. So just to make it clear, this is a simple guide, not getting too in-depth with things, but I will explain her kit. I will explain her combat partners. I will explain the weapons that you want, the Geniemon that you want, as well as get into demon wedges a little bit. So to start off, the thing that you're going to want to look for NIFLE is going to be Lumino attack, skill damage, skill range, skill efficiency, as well as trigger probability, which isn't going to show on here, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Her best in slot weapons are going to be the katana and the pistol. Now, someone told me in my last video in the comments that using the best in slot weapon for a character isn't going to increase the character's overall damage. It's just going to increase the damage they deal with that weapon. So with that in mind, you don't have to strictly stick to this. However, it still will give a slight bump if you are getting the proper buff on the weapon. So for example, coming over here to melee weapons, this one is for skill range, and then I believe there's another one down here, which is also for skill range. It's going to give me the exact same amount of skill range, 36%. However, with this one being in her best in slot weapon, right, when I do have to end up using this, I will do a little more damage. But it's up to you and what you want to take with that information. So just know, even though the character has their best in slot weapons right here, you don't necessarily have to strictly stay to that unless you want to maximize the little bits of damage. So moving on to her skills, you're going to have her skill right here marked as damage. You're going to have her ult marked as buff, and then you're going to have her passive. Now, starting off with her skill, you're going to have two different ones. It's going to flip-flop between the two. Lunar Hunt and Solar Eclipse. Lunar Hunt is going to do Umbro damage and reduce the enemy's movement speed, and Solar Eclipse is going to do Lumino damage and decrease their attack. Moving on to her ult over here, it's going to buff her skill. So you enter Funeral Rite, and upon entry, if your skill range exceeds 100%, that is going to be converted into skill damage. So if you're at 150 skill range, you're going to get 50% extra skill damage, and your skill range will still be at 100%. So when you enter her ult, there is no way to increase the skill range because all of that is going to get eaten up and then converted into your skill damage. What it's also going to do is your trigger probability will increase for your ranged weapons. Your skill is going to have no sanity cost. And for the Lunar Hunt, the enemies will be pulled towards the center, and Solar Eclipse will deal extra damage, and you can only cast 6 of those, not 6 of each, 6 in total. Based on the user's trigger probability for ranged weapons, casting Lunar Hunt also has a chance to spawn Solar Eclipse at the same location, which may spawn another Lunar Hunt. Solar Eclipse and Lunar Hunt instances generated this way are not enhanced by Misty Sea. So basically what that means is that is going to be for your basic skill over here. So every time that you do damage with one or the other, it has a chance to double proc, and then that proc has a chance to proc again. So a total of 3 skills for 1. And it'll, of course, flip-flop through. So you use Lunar Hunt. If it procs, it'll then do a Solar Eclipse. If that Solar Eclipse procs, it'll then do a Lunar Hunt. All with 1 skill cast for 10 sanity. So that's pretty good. It does cap out to a certain point, though. Moving on to another upgrade for her passive is Lunar Hunt can trigger Umbro bonus effects, and Solar Eclipse can trigger Lumino bonus effects. and the trigger probability is going to be 50%. Moving into the next one, this is only going to be for when deployed as a combat partner. It's going to increase attack for self and Lumino allies. And it's going to be a 50% attack boost. So this is going to be good if you want to use her as a combat partner for any Lumino character. You're just going to go ahead and buff the attack for herself and then your main DPS, who's going to be Lumino. Now, moving on to her melee weapons. Of course, I already went over it a little bit. You're going to have the katana, the wither shade right here. It's going to give you 36% skill range. That's really what you're going to be looking for. Now, you can just go ahead and go for skill damage. However, remember, any skill range past 100% is then going to be converted into skill damage. So as you can see, you start off with 100% in all of those. So if we just think for a second, if this gives me 36 and that gives me 24, 36 is more than 24. So just going ahead and going with the Wither Shade or the dual weapons right here is going to be better than going for something that gives you skill damage, such as this one. Now, another thing, if you don't have this, right, this one you get just straight up from playing the story, I believe, and this one you have to grind for. So it's okay to go ahead and level this one up until you get this one or the other one that gives you skill range. One difference also is going to be in the charged attacks. So if I'm here, right, and let's say I got to build up my sanity, obviously, to get my ult, and I got to use some of these attacks. If you do a charged attack, it's going to do a bunch of slashes like that. And it's going to do not too much damage, but a decent bit of damage and good AoE damage. Now, if we go over here to this one and we equip this one, the charge attack is going to be different. She's going to throw a flea forward ahead of her, and it's just going to stay there infinitely, I'm pretty sure. Maybe there's like a super long timer on it, but I've thrown it and then continued in a dungeon and pulled it back to me later like that, right? So that also depends on really what you're looking for in your main weapon, the type of charged effect attack you want. Even though you may not be using that much, there still is going to be some downtime, especially before you have the character fully built. Now for the range weapons, this right here is going to be another weapon that you get just straight up from the story. It's going to give you trigger probability. Now this is going to be great to start off with, and if you really just want that stat stick, you can keep it because you're probably not going to be using her range weapon as much, just like you're not going to be using her melee weapon as much. But if you do want the best in slot for her, which is going to include being a pistol, you're going to be looking at Entropic Singularity, which is going to give you a 75% trigger probability, and each shot with this weapon has a chance, based on the weapon trigger probability, to fire an extra projectile at no ammo cost, dealing AoE damage equal to 50% of its attack. So that's just going to be an extra little bit of damage here and there with this weapon. So just keep that in mind. But if you're looking for just a straight up the most trigger probability you can get, that one is only 75, and this one is 90, which I do believe is the highest. So that's probably going to be what you're looking for. Now, if you also want to maybe focus on the skill damage some more, you can go with the weapon that's going to give you 36% skill range if you don't care that much about the trigger probability for this passive right here. Now, getting into the combat partners for your Lady NIFLE. Some good combat partners are going to be Margie, because for Margie's passive effect, when the user or allies pick up loot, the user gains 1 stack of jackpot, lasting for the rest of the battle. Each stack increases skill damage up to 20 stacks, and then skill damage boost per stack is going to be 2.4% starting off, and as you level it up, it's going to upgrade that boost. Her second passive is going to grant increased attack to all other allies. That's going to be a 45% attack boost. And then right here, it's also going to be another attack boost, increase attack for self and allies of 40%. So you're going to be gaining a total of 85% attack boost along with a skill damage boost. She seems pretty busted as a support for her. Another good combat partner is going to be the main character. Now, if you look right here, it's going to give you increased trigger probability for self and allies after using Flare. And then Flare deals Lumino damage to nearby enemies and grants self and allies both Ultra Shields and Incandescence increases your weapon damage. Now, her second passive right here, increased weapon damage for self and allies. You're not really going to be using that much because you are really focusing on skill damage for Lady NIFLE. However, if you are looking for that trigger probability, this is going to be a pretty good buff for her. Moving on to Truffle and Filbert, she is a pretty good combat partner because, as you can see here, increased resolve for self and allies if 2 or more characters on the team share the same element. So if you were to use the main character, the team would look like Lady NIFLE, main character, Truffle, and Filbert. That would be a pretty good setup. However, if you want to use Margie, then I would say don't use Truffle and Filbert. You could use someone else, such as Daphne, who is going to increase crit chance for self and allies. That's going to be a pretty good boost. Other characters that are pretty good would be Lisbel. I think she's probably going to be better as a kind of main carry over Lady NIFLE. However, if you do still want to use her and you want to use her as a combat partner, her last passive buff right here is going to be increase attack for self and Lumino allies, and that's going to be a 40% boost. However, if you are just looking strictly for that attack boost, then you're looking mainly more for Margie. But since she is Lumino, she does fit, and then another setup you could do would be Lady Lisbel and then that Truffle and Filbert for that extra sanity, in case you're really struggling with sanity. So that's going to be it for the combat partners. Now, moving on to these guys. I don't have very many of these. However, looking at some of the ones that I do have, it is going to have the passive skills right here, which is going to increase the attack for a specific element type. Now, you're going to want to look for ones that will increase a Lumino attack. Right now, I don't believe I have. So I have this one. The main character and combat partner gain just a little bit of Lumino attack and extra HP. Now, I'm pretty sure there's going to be ones that buff that quite a bit more. However, that is going to be generally what you look for, is going to be buffs in Lumino attack. So for these, again, you're looking for either skill range, skill damage, anything to do with your skills, or you're looking for Lumino attack. You also just have Miraculous Broboxy, who's a great pick for really anything, because you're going to have the auto pickup range, more XP from defeated enemies, and a more chance to drop bonus loot. So that's always going to be great. And that'll also be great if you use Margie, because again, going back to Margie's passive, is whenever the user ally pick up loot, they'll get a stack of jackpot, which increases the skill damage. So that's going to be a great addition as well. Now, moving into the demon wedges. I don't have very many. Now, one thing that I do know that you're going to want to look for is you're going to want to look for, in these stats right here, you're going to want to look for, obviously, the skill effects as well. Now, one thing that you don't need on her in regards to skills, if we go over here to attributes, is going to be duration. That's one thing that you're just not going to need. You're mainly looking for efficiency, range, and damage. Now, looking at some of the demon wedges here, you're mainly going to want to be looking for anything that is going to give you skill damage, as I've said before, skill range, or Lumino attack. So for example, this one would be a good one. Looking here, one that I do know that you're going to want is going to be Typhoon's Prime Serenity. The effect here is going to be it restores additional sanity by 7 for you and your teammates every 3 seconds. So that's going to be a good one that I know that you're going to want to run on her, because you're going to need sanity in order to build up that ult to get your main damage going. Otherwise, you're really going to be looking for anything that gives you skill range, skill damage. However, keep an eye out because some of these are one in effect of the other. To recap the demon wedges, you're going to be looking for Lumino attack, skill damage, skill range, skill efficiency, as well as looking for Prime Serenity, which is going to restore an additional 7 sanity for you and your teammates every 3 seconds. Looking at demon wedges for the range weapons and the melee weapon, again, this is going to be something that I don't know very much on. However, I can just give you some suggestions. So some of these are going to just increase the attack of the weapon. That's going to be great. Also increasing certain combos and things like that. Crit damage, crit chance, just regular attack. Trigger probability, you're not going to be wanting to look at that for your melee weapon because you don't need it for the melee weapon. You need trigger probability for your ranged weapon. So just kind of looking through some of these, none of these really look all that great. Very specific. Charge attack speed, that would be a good one for this katana specifically. You have increased damage to certain mobs. Now here you have Fenrir katana. It does upgrade the charge attack for the katana. I'm not exactly sure how much better this is compared to the normal charge attack, so this might be one that you want to look out for as well. For the range weapon, there are some here that is going to increase your trigger probability as well as the ammo conversion rate, some reload speeds, things like that, as well as going ahead and increasing your damage against certain mobs. So that's going to be it for the demon wedges. Now, sorry if that isn't very comprehensive and was all over the place. Again, demon wedges are not something that I am 100% certain on. But yeah, that's going to be it for this simple guide. Might have went on for a little longer than I wanted for a simple guide. However, I just wanted to go ahead and set up this guide for you guys and try and explain everything to the best of my capability. If I did get anything wrong, please let me know down in the comments and I can make an updated guide or just pin your comment so that way anyone else looking for this guide knows what I got wrong. I'm not 100% sure on everything, right? I could be wrong in a lot of aspects. I am very new to making guides and YouTube videos in general, so cut me a little bit of slack. And above all else, I hope you have a wonderful day.